Well, greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on this special TenX Strategies webinar as we head into the last 45, 50 days of 2024. This is a momentous time in many ways, but for fundraisers at nonprofit organizations, this is really one of the busiest times. Add to that, it's at a time when markets are up, and that has big consequences for our engagement. And I'm so glad to have with us today Gabe Conger. Gabe Conger, I'm sorry, Gabe Conger, president of the Bradley Impact Fund. Many of you may know Gabe. Bradley Impact Fund is associated with the Bradley Foundation in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a donor-advised fund, but Gabe really knows this area. And Gabe, let's just start off. The S&P 500 was up 26% last year. It's already up 23% this year. Yeah. People who hold stocks, just stocks alone among many asset classes, are up big. What does that mean for generous donors who are already motivated to support a cause, but may have other means or motivations to give more generously this time right now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Kevin. And thanks so much for the opportunity to come on. I think you said it well. It's people are both motivated, and a lot of folks have the capacity and ability to give more. So it's just an absolute fantastic time to be fundraising and to be talking to people who believe strongly in the missions of the organizations where you're at. And so it's more now. I think you mentioned in the email that you sent out, you mentioned John Von Cannon, and one of his sayings was near, dear, and clear. And so not just how much people are giving and supporting, but how. And so knowing that and staying close to your donors as we go into to the year end is especially important. So.
Well, let's tackle this in terms of first the benefit to the donor, then the benefit to the recipient, the nonprofit organization. Yep. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about how organizations might think about positioning themselves right now, what they should do in terms of processes. And I definitely want to touch in on the benefit of a partnership with donor advised funds as well. So sure, we'll be able to speak directly to that. Kick us off. From the standpoint of a donor who's held a stock for more than 12 months and it's appreciated, what is the value to them of contributing stock directly, either to the nonprofit organization or to a donor advised fund, versus selling it and giving those cash proceeds to the nonprofit?
Yeah, so in essence, the benefit is double. So not only if you were to sell it, you're going to be liable for capital gains. So not only by transferring that stock directly, gifting it to an organization, are you avoiding that capital gain, but then you're also receiving a fair market value tax deduction. So that is kind of the incredible kind of advantage of donating appreciated assets as opposed to just cash out of an account or selling that stock and then donating it.
So. Great. Well, my friend Rob Testweed at Merrill Lynch, who helps a lot of groups, I think, who are joining today's call, says it's a win-win-lose, a win for the donor, win for the organization, lose for the IRS, because that's a tax that they will not assess on either the donor or the nonprofit organization. So what's the benefit to the nonprofit organization in your perspective at this, especially this time of the year, the conditions of the market? You mentioned John Von Cannon. I know you worked with John at the Heritage Foundation. I want to touch on that. John was such a great force for philanthropy, taught so many of us some important lessons. But he always talked about when markets were up, people felt more generous and gave more. So what should that mean for the nonprofit organization right now?
Yeah, it was interesting. So one of the things we do, we had a smaller, more modest family foundation hosting their annual meeting in our offices a week ago. And I mean, I'll tell you, they sat down as a family. They're making their decisions. They're in touch with their investment advisors, reviewing their portfolios. And not only are they motivated and excited to give more, they're looking at the performance of their portfolio, and it's up. And so that ability to give more, and if you kind of think about the ways in which people give, I think sometimes when we think about foundations, there's, I don't know, 150 or so that have assets of $1 billion or more in the country, endowments. But there's something, I think, more than 100,000 that have assets of less than 50 million that are more, don't have a 16-quarter average complex payout rules. They're just family members, or a couples getting together and making these giving decisions, typically at year end. So the opportunity, not just with kind of individuals as you might segment them out with caseloads and in cultivation, but I think foundations too, at this point, just something else to think about.
Well, great. I remember many years ago when I was at the Leadership Institute, and Ambassador Shelby Cullum Davis, who had been the chairman of the Heritage Foundation, was making stock gifts, and he wrote a note on it, said, "This has just been a very good year for me." And it was a lot more than he would ordinarily give. I mean, that's just a very common thing. And we also know that, more than 30% of charitable contributions in the United States are made in the last 45 days of the year.
Yeah.
So this compounds a lot of the feelings of how generous somebody might be. Let's set aside just for a second. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen who are on the call, please join in the chat or the Q&A. I'll try to address your questions. We'll try to keep this to about half an hour. But Gabe, tell us a little bit about the Bradley Impact Fund and its relationship association with the Bradley Foundation, how it came about.
Sure.
But also, if you wouldn't mind just explaining again, what is a donor-advised fund?
Yeah, so maybe start there and work my way backwards. So, sometimes the terminology is confusing because it's a donor advised fund at a donor advised fund. So a donor advised fund or a donor advised fund sponsor is a public charity, and what happens is donors will make gifts to the Bradley Impact Fund or other donor advised fund sponsors, like a Donors Trust, a National Christian Foundation, Fidelity Charitable, Vanguard Charitable, Schwab, and then you receive an immediate tax deduction for whatever you've gifted, whether that's appreciated securities or cash or crypto, real estate, art. We accept a lot of different kinds of things. And then from there, it's really a matter of donor intent. So some donors will be doing this on an annual basis, meeting with your accountant, your financial advisor at the end of the year, making decisions, and it's just a efficient vehicle. But others are having significant wealth events, selling businesses, so they're going to be giving out from those accounts over time. So I think there's really two different general ways to think about it. One, more of a charitable checking account for a donor, and then the other would be a charitable investment account for the future. And some folks use them both ways. So
how did the Bradley Impact Fund come about?
yeah, so your other question. The earliest reference was actually in 1999. The board of directors of the Bradley Foundation had some members had some involvement with a prior iteration of the National Christian Foundation. And so we're very familiar with donor advised funds, always thinking about the future, thinking strategically, planning long term. Fast forward a number of years, and the board of the Bradley Foundation voted to capitalize and open up the doors of the Bradley Impact Fund, which was in 2013. So that was the start, and at that point and up until the present, I'm not familiar with a private foundation which is chosen to help fund and start up another donor advised fund. But so that several years of kind of all of the blocking and tackling of a DAF, and we had some just amazing folks who helped make that possible. And then the last 5 or 6 years is donor advised funds have really continued to grow. We've worked with more and more people around the country. We host events and conferences. We do a lot of work strategically advising donors. and then also just having that principled vehicle that shares your values for charitable giving. So that's the long story, medium length, I guess.
No, that's nice. So let's unpack that even a little bit more for folks' benefit, and I'll say a couple things, and you can correct me where I'm wrong. So
Sure.
if a person, an individual, a family has charitable intent, and we'll say this is a more appropriate time of the year around Thanksgiving, giving, spirit of giving, giving back, set aside the tax benefits of trying to get it done in 2024.
Yeah.
They could write a check. They could make a credit card contribution to a nonprofit organization. But again, when you have appreciated assets, there is the double benefit, as you described it, to giving the assets directly to a charitable organization because of the tax consequences, either avoiding tax on the capital gain as well as just being able to give more to the organization. But if so, you can do that. And most nonprofit organizations are set up to receive stock,
Yep.
hopefully, but most aren't necessarily set up to receive art or real estate or other things. Is that where a donor advised fund also comes in? I mean, is that what you're doing? Do you, for example, do you all accept crypto?
Yes, yeah, no, it's a good question, and that's uh, one of the great benefits of a donor advised fund, and for fundraisers and for organizations, working with and having good relationships, because it's how are you having, or how are you providing more value to your donors, and playing that advisory role, and especially as you're dreaming bigger, as you're casting those visions, and you giving for the future in working with donors. You may run into situations. I know very much at the start of my career, several different examples, how we worked closely with donor advised funds in my time at the Heritage Foundation to be able to accept gifts. And so we do accept crypto, real estate, stock in privately held companies. And so even if you just have a good partner to kind of even just kind of talk through things, and provide that sort of value, you may be able to work with a donor to accept and to receive an even larger gift and donation.
All right.
That makes sense.
So let's, in the case of the Bradley Foundation, Lyndon Harry Bradley had accumulated all these assets, and I guess the sale of their company. And it
Yeah.
was very conventional when you had something like that to start a private foundation. And so the Bradley Foundation is certainly a great example of that. The Scaife Foundation, the Searle Freedom Trust would be another example of that. The Charles Koch Foundation, and many other examples. And there are plenty of people who can have smaller family foundations, but there's a lot of hassle attached to that. You've got some tax consequences. You've got a lot of paperwork filings. So another benefit for somebody giving is to give directly to a donor advised fund. Is that, or actually, or to set up an account at a donor advised fund?
Yes, and one thing, gifting appreciated assets. If you think about you're very generous investor in the market. You want to support a lot of charities, especially now at the year end. Think about you working with your broker. Let's say you want to support 10, 20. We've got some donors who are supporting 70 or 80 charities a year. And so think about all the different stock contribution instructions to every single charity, all of those tax receipts, all of that back and forth with your broker, or whether you or I have an account with a donor advised fund. I'm transferring assets in, and then I'm advising grants, making recommendations to all of those different charities. It's just for donors and for brokers and other investment advisors. It can be a really streamlined, easier process to help charities receive more money, and works out well for donors too.
Well, that's great to know. And of course, if you give to the donor advised fund these appreciated stock or something now, it doesn't have to go anywhere until you make a request to the donor advised fund, right?
Correct. Yes, we are a public charity, and so your account, there are no requirements like a private foundation payout rate. So
Okay.
you could make your decisions from a tax standpoint, at the end of the year, and then make those giving decisions after the first of the year to kind of start off with those charities investing in their missions and their programs for the year. So it just makes your decision making a lot more flexible with kind of your intent and how you want to go about things. I'll never forget. I was in the office at Heritage in my first year. It was New Year's Eve. It wasn't 11:59 p.m., but it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and phone call from a donor who was trying to gift some appreciated stock, and we were the fourth charity that they had called and tried to get a hold of. So that's a real world example that happened. So
Well, that's a great example, and thank you for sharing that. And I've shared that before, and others have as well. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're thinking about end of year, you've got to be staffed at your nonprofit for this. There are so many examples, and it's just exacerbated in a year of heavy market appreciation where people just wake up on December 30th or 31st, like, oh, wow, I've got to get my giving done now. And if you're not there to receive it, you may be out of luck. I do want to talk about the websites in a moment, but Gabe, how should people work with like you? For example, let's say I have a motivated donor who shares the principles of the Bradley Impact Fund and my organization. They have, maybe they want to start a donor advised fund. I can encourage them to do it with you or with Donors Trust. Or even, how should I be in touch with you as representing an organization that I think has similar values and principles and objectives as you do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, as follow-up, we can include my contact information and that of our team. Spend a lot of time with different organizations and fundraisers around the country, learning more about the missions of their organizations and what they're up to, and then really, from a donor intent standpoint, what are the donors who we work with? Some of them know exactly what they want to make recommendations to, but others are wanting to learn about new things, or I want to advance parental choice in education. Where do things stand on the implementation side of things with all of these ESA programs, or how do we increase the pipeline of teachers at these choice and charter schools, and who are people working creatively and tirelessly to address those issues. So it's get in touch. You can take my word for it. None of us are ever feeling spammed or receiving information. It's always it's again, to go back to John, but it's near, dear, and clear with those who can help make connections and help you advance your mission.
All right. Two other donor advised fund questions, and then we're going to switch back to gifts directly of stock and how nonprofits should be thinking about promoting it right now. How much say does the donor have, or do you have, in where the gift could go? So let's say I set up an account at the Bradley Impact Fund, and I call up and say, Gabe, I'd like to give $25,000 out of that to the Center for American Progress. What will you say to that?
Sure. Well, my board of directors will say no, and that's and it's a great. We're very upfront and clear, and people are very grateful that we will make those distinctions. I mean, for organizations that would not be part of our mission, that we would not make those grants. Some other DAF sponsors aren't as clear, and there continues to be an issue to this end. But our guiding principles include a belief in free markets, constitutional order, informed citizens, robust civil society, and the protection of donor intent. And so sometimes, I mean, so when you are making a gift of appreciated stock or other assets into a donor advised account, you are technically legally gifting that money away, similar to any other public charity. So you maintain advisory privileges over that. You can recommend the organizations and the projects that go to, but you cannot legally say so. So the tax benefits are better than a private foundation because of that, but then there also are some limitations as well.
All right. One question in the queue is, are you familiar with a purpose trust?
Purpose trust. Yes. We have not dealt with them directly, but so I have not worked intimately with
Okay.
them before. I'll be
Okay.
honest.
All right, let's switch to stocks. Okay, so here's the moment right now when organizations should be promoting giving stock. I shared in the fundraising tip last week a nonprofit organization that sent a terrific email. It motivated us to think about giving in this way. So I would strongly encourage people who are on the call today and the organizations you represent to think about promoting stock gifts as a vehicle to support your mission, to support specific initiatives or projects that you're funding. But another alternative is to say, particularly in a phone conversation with a donor who may be trying to think through what's best, hey, you may want to do this through a donor advised fund as well. I want to point in particular to the Mercatus Center, the Mercatus at George Mason University's website. Their donate page, I think, is set up really well. If you want to donate stock, it's very clear the process on what to do. Emily, Grace, if you could put that in the chat, I think that would be helpful as an example. That's on the back end side, on the web side. But we do know that a lot of donors are searching, late at night. Like, I've got to do this. What do I do? And they don't want to call you, and they want a quick response. So they look around for websites on instructions. Gabe, do you have any particular thoughts on some groups who do that well, who think about that well, even how you all think about that? We know that actually just the landing page can be a huge obstacle to giving. And if a donor hits it and doesn't quite get it, then they move on and move on to somebody else.
Yeah, I had a former colleague who's in the digital fundraising space who walked through the statistics on the data of every additional click that you have to make to the website to make that donation losing money. So for example, I mean, if you pop up on our page to get to stock contribution instructions, it's one click. And so I'm honestly off the top of my head, I'm forgetting the name of the organization, but they even had a year-end banner that you mentioned donating, appreciating assets. So not just the amount of clicks and donate, but even putting it there prominently, above the kind of the carousel at the top of the page, I thought was, especially now, especially this year, a great idea. And year over year to think about year-end campaigns, testing different things to see what's effective in different environments, but the absolute minimal amount of clicks possible to get to the instructions, and then kind of those sorts of temporary banners and otherwise at the top of home pages, I think can be really effective.
And see if you agree. I think in direct mail and letters that go out, in emails associated even with Giving Tuesday coming up on December 3rd,
Yeah.
and other kinds of communication. Something as simple as, many of our generous supporters find it valuable to give gifts of appreciated stock, especially in a year when there's been such a market appreciation. If that may be something you want to consider, those benefits as well, feel free to contact us, or you can do it in this way, just making it as easy as possible and repeating that message. It's not so much like give stock, it's, hey, this might be valuable to you. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, no, the value to the donor and hearing it in different ways, going through that. So those sort of, as you're going through kind of caseload and otherwise towards the end of the year, being mindful of how people give and the opportunities that are available. That message, how can I be of help to you accomplish your goals? And that kind of open-ended language of have you considered how this might be advantageous this year, I think I completely agree. I think that's really, really effective.
All right. Let's say, so an organization should probably have a relationship with some kind of financial advisor or firm that can help them process the gift. They should probably do that now if they haven't already done that. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, I think that, yeah, you would definitely want to have things beforehand.
A- And then
Understand it correctly.
when someone gives, for example, to the Bradley Impact Fund, how do you handle receipting? That's not so simple either. Can you give us a couple instructions on, and maybe people can either look at what you do or Google it or what have you, but that's something that has to be addressed as well.
Sure. You mean for the donors or for the
For
organizations?
how does the organization, in case your case, if I give a chunk of stock to you,
Yep.
or even multiple stocks, how do you give me the charitable gift receipt? How do you evaluate? How do you give a value to that gift?
For any sort of asset. I mean,
Or
so
the stock in particular? Is it the
stock in
date of the
particular.
gift, and and the price that day, the closing price? How does that work?
Yeah, it's that average of the high and the low that day. That's the receipted value, and it's for the shares themselves, and then that's sent immediately as well as easily accessible for people's accounts. So that value, the average of the high and the low that day.
All right, very good. There's also someone's asked about tax credit gifting. I'm guessing that's related to educational tax credits, but I'm not sure. Have you had
Yeah.
experience with donors involved in that?
Yeah, Colorado, Arizona in particular, I know of. There's other states I can't think of off the top of my head, but that's not going to be an option from a donor advised fund in particular. But I mean, that's certainly opportunities for giving as well.
All right. Well, this has been terrific, Gabe. Thank you. Close this out. I know you're glad to speak with people who may want to reach out to you at the Bradley Impact Fund, but close this out with just maybe even how you got involved in this to begin with. I know that's always helpful for people to understand, and then just some closing comments about what you would recommend we think about, especially at this time of the year, and working with donors and working with DAFs and working with our nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, no, I made my way out to DC a long time ago. Had the great privilege to begin to work in fundraising. Have spent my career 6.5 years ago. Received the invite to come back to Wisconsin and join the Bradley Foundation and then the Bradley Impact Fund team, and the ability to work with donors and organizations in the policy space, yes, but also in the civil society space, local private voluntary efforts. Kind of, if we really believe in limited government, and then private philanthropy, local associations, the neighborhoods that you're involved in, your kids' schools are just critically important. And so it's been a real privilege to be on the team here. And as far as year end, I mean, I think it's started, and so maybe I'll end with JVK, and it's not with John Von Cannon. It's not donors are people, and they are not ATMs. And so regardless, whether the market was great or as it is, or had dropped off precipitously, maintaining relationships with people, getting to know them, what are their dreams, what are their passions, what do they care about, over the long term, to support the mission of your organization and connect their goals to that vision, is important, regardless of people, how they're doing financially. So I think I would stay with that with that saying.
That's a great way to close us out, and a great point to emphasize, because that is what it's all about. Thank you, Gabe Conger. Thank you for joining us today. And ladies and gentlemen, as we head into Thanksgiving and the end of the year, I hope you're well positioned to help your donors achieve their objectives through the efforts that you're doing, just in the manner that Gabe talked about. Thanks again for joining us. We'll be back to you again soon. Thanks a lot.